Minister, despite what you've said when you were moving your amendment, I think you paint a very rosy picture, and why wouldn't you? But I think if anybody saw the demonstration last week outside the Dáil, and it wasn't by a long shot all the providers, there were hundreds and hundreds of workers there, and listen to parents, I think you have to recognise that there is a crisis in our childcare system. Many creches have closed, albeit you say it's slowing down this year, but they've closed, and in communities where they're closed and gone forever. And childcare workers are leaving the system because the current rates of pay are so low and their skills are not being recognised. Many parents are crippled by childcare costs and the oppressive financial burden of the spiralling cost of living. The current childcare model is broken, Minister, and the government subsidises small and medium companies, and some creche owners report that they feel handcuffed by the amount of paperwork that is needed to apply for those subsidies. Parents, on the other hand, are constantly worrying that the costs will rise further, and childcare workers know that their skills and their contribution to this very important job is not being properly recognised. In my area, creches have been closing down. Linders, St Michael's and Ballyfermot, the Nina and Inchicore, very important locations for parents to be able to access childcare, they're gone and they're not coming back. There's no doubt that some private companies are struggling, but how many we don't exactly know. But as Deputy Whitmore referred to the largest childcare operators in the state, I think I want to just back up what she has said, because the Giraffe Company did see their profits rise in 2020 by a staggering 61% to 3.5 million. And that is not something that you want to see in the provision of an essential service. And they were paid out lots of money to their shareholders that the state subsidised them for during COVID. Now, they're late filling in their accounts for 2021, but they did attempt in Dublin 8 to raise their costs twice during the last few years, and I had to make representations to your office to intervene to make sure it didn't happen. Nearly 2/3 of all early years services are privately owned, and the remainder are community-based services, not for profit. Thousands of workers on low pay are not compensated for their skills, and most services operate at capacity with long waiting lists. Access to these services is getting more and more difficult, and fees for parents are way too high. So I want to talk to the amendment that I can't move, which is basically to say that we believe the Sinn Féin motion, although it's welcome, doesn't go too far. It's limited and says nothing about moving to a publicly funded childcare system. And we wanted to amend it to say immediately move towards a publicly owned and funded national childcare service, free at the point of use, where childcare workers are employed as public sector workers on pay and benefit in line with teachers, obviously on a scale in line with teachers. That's a reference to. We propose that move as one that we would transition to immediately. We need a statement from government to say that they will do that, to provide childcare free at the point of use, so there's no discrimination against workers, against parents, regardless of how marginalised or how poor or how much they can afford it. The National Women's Council, you're probably aware of their publication where they're calling for a similar model, and they point out that 1 in 3 women who leave their jobs do so because of the high childcare costs, and that rises to a staggering 60% among lone parents. The motion, or the amendment to the motion as we've called for and the National Women's called for, was also called for by the Citizens' Assembly on Gender Equality and the United Nations Commission on the Rights of Children. So it's a model that many EU countries employ, many don't, but Ireland still remains one of the most expensive places to access childcare in the EU, like many other things. Now, we have a pre-budget submission to be published on Friday, and we've put in a lot of questions on this, and the costs of doing this will be detailed in that. I'm not going to go into them there, but those details are important. I think the lack of affordable and accessible childcare is a real barrier for parents, for communities and for the children themselves. Early years education is the single biggest barrier to women participating fully in life and in work. And I say women because we are still left with a gender imbalance in care duties, whether they're paid or unpaid. And early years education should be seen as a public good, a vital public service, an investment in children and not a commodity, not for something that makes profit. We wouldn't tolerate a hodgepodge of private and sometimes community-owned and various funding streams going into our 4-, 5-, 6-year-olds in national and primary school. So why do we tolerate it when they're that bit younger? In fact, if education was fully free and state-run, it would be a huge plus to our society as a whole. And all of the sociological surveys and reports show that the more we invest, the younger we invest it in children, the better the outcomes in life for everybody, for the economy, for our citizens and for our state as a whole. Everyone, regardless of their income, regardless of how marginalised they are, should have access to quality and free childcare. And we would have liked to move our amendment. We're not being able to move because you've moved yours, but nevertheless that policy I think is very important, needs to be promoted, and we would like to see your government move towards that in the future.
Thank you very much.